you see a strange, pulsing blue light in the darkness. You squint, trying to get a better look. But no need. The light is moving closer, and closer, and closer, until, suddenly, a magnificent glowing blue jellyfish floats right up to your window. Blue light courses through the creature's body as it slowly disappears from view. A moment later, a balloon-shaped fish with a see-through head swims by. After that, a blood-red squid with bulging eyes darts past. Now you know where you are. The inky blackness surrounding you is water. The metal sphere you are sitting inside is a submersible. And the place you're traveling to is one of the most mysterious parts of our planet, the deep ocean. The deep ocean begins 3,280 feet below the surface and extends all the way to the sea floor. This is as deep as 12,000 feet below the surface in most places. No sunlight can reach such depths. So the deep sea is always pitch black and very cold. The water pressure, which is the force that water puts on its surroundings, is also dangerously crushing here. Luckily, you're protected within the safe walls of your submersible. These extreme conditions make it challenging to explore the deep ocean. So challenging, in fact, that scientists know more about the surface of Mars than they do about the ocean floor. Still, thanks in advances to technology, scientists around the world are beginning to learn more about the mysterious world of the deep sea. The ocean has always been a place of great mystery. Over the centuries, the sea has inspired countless myths and legends. In ancient times, some cultures believed the ocean was home to entire underwater civilizations of mermen and mermaids. Throughout the Middle Ages, fishermen in Europe long believed the sea to be full of vicious monsters, like massive sea serpents that were just waiting to strike and drag them down to the depths. And up until the late 1860s, most scientists thought that the deep ocean was a cold, lifeless abyss. Of course, as you know from what you have already seen on your trip today, that isn't true. Thanks in part to the invention of deep-sea submersibles, like the one you are traveling in, we now know that the deep sea is anything but lifeless. In fact, the deep ocean has one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. In the past decade alone, thousands of fascinating species have been discovered. Pale shrimp-like creatures that can grow to the size of a small dog, octopuses with ghostly white skin, and massive spider crabs the length of a car are just a few of the strange and wonderful creatures that have been spotted. So far, we've only explored about 20% of our oceans. What other fascinating creatures are out there right now, waiting to be discovered? For now, though, it's time to make our way back up to the surface. Submersibles can only stay underwater for so long before they run out of power and oxygen. Slowly, you begin to rise back up through the darkness. Soon, you emerge safely back at the surface. You can hear waves lapping up against the window. You see the ocean stretched out in front of you. Your journey to the deep may be over for today, but your exploration of the deep sea doesn't have to end here. After all, 80% of our oceans are still out there waiting to be explored by the next generation of adventurers. Maybe you will be one of them.
Sound editing by Dry Spell Productions. Script and narration by Mackenzie Caro. All music and sound effects by Pond 5.
Raise your hand if that sounds like something that you would be interested in doing. Going in a submersible, right? A small machine that goes all the way down deep, deep, deep in the ocean. Raise your hand if that's something that you might want to do. Yeah, so people who do that kind of stuff are called oceanographers. You can go to school to study oceanography and become an oceanographer. Where I come from in Panama, Panama is, they have a lot of beaches there, and the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are an hour apart by car. So, unlike here where you have to travel for like 24 hours to go from one coast to the other by car, in Panama, you can pick either ocean to go and study, okay? I'm a certified scuba diver. So, I've done stuff like scuba diving down in the deep, okay? And then you have to get certified to be a scuba diver, and you have a tank of oxygen with you. The deeper you go, the less time, the quicker your oxygen in your tank, that you have to take an oxygen tank with you, the faster your oxygen runs out because of the pressure. So if your ocean is right here, and you're all the way down here, your oxygen might run out in, I don't know, 30 minutes, versus if you're up here, your oxygen, you might have an hour before your oxygen runs out, okay? And on your oxygen tank, you have these gauges that tell you how much oxygen you have. That's why they were talking about taking the submersible to find a ship like the Titanic. The Titanic is more than a mile below the surface. It is really, 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 really deep. And when I was your age, they had not found the Titanic. They had no idea where it was. And they had been searching for it ever since it sunk. Okay? Raise your hand if you know anything about the Titanic before we started reading this article. Some of you have. Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Titanic.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, there's some things about the movie that are inaccurate, and there are some things about the movie that are accurate, right? It was the biggest ship built at the time, and they called the ship the unsinkable ship. And what happened to it? Do you know how?
Iceberg.
Iceberg. Yep, hit an iceberg.
It was an iceberg. It was an iceberg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I was young, I was totally fascinated by the story of the Titanic, the unsinkable ship that hit an iceberg and sunk, and they couldn't find it, right? So they finally did encounter the Titanic, and we're gonna watch a video about how they're researching it, okay? And when I was a kid and they finally found it, that was super, super, super exciting, but they had been looking for it for years. But it was so far down that they needed special submersibles, right, those machines, to get down there and find it. So, any questions or comments? Yes?
What year did it sink?
Oh, okay, here we go. When did the Titanic sink?
The answer I found is the 14th of April, 1912.
1912. Okay. And who knew that in April, traveling from where they sail from England, right? It was Southampton in England. And who knew that in April they would encounter an iceberg, but they did. maybe that's pretty common, but I just don't imagine there being icebergs.
They didn't discover it until September 1st, 1985.
1985, so I was 14. I was your age when they discovered it. I was so excited about that.
I was 2.
Yeah, you weren't. Were you even
I
alive?
was 2.
My mom was 2.
I was 2.
I thought you were saying you were excited about it too, but you were actually 2 years old. I see what you're saying.
Sorry.
No worries.
Someday.
All right, we're gonna watch the video on the search of the Titanic. 0 voice, please, and thank you. I love my drawings. They're awesome.
Hi Scope readers, I'm Allison, one of the editors on Scope, and I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk to you about Lauren Tarshis' thrilling new nonfiction article, Searching for the Titanic. It's the story of how the famous ship was rediscovered 73 years after it struck an iceberg and sank into the Atlantic Ocean. If you're like me, you probably have a lot of questions swirling around in your mind after reading this story. When I finished it, I needed to know, what happened next? So I went online and did a little digging around on my own, and I wanted to share a few of the fascinating things I found out. One of the first things I wondered was, did Robert Ballard ever go down himself to explore the wreckage up close? And the answer is yes. The year after he found the shipwreck, Ballard dove down with a small crew in a submersible to take a closer look. The team saw many wonders. A chandelier with tiny sea creatures growing out of it, a rusty anchor, the towering steel front of the ship. They took detailed photos and video. These images set off waves of excitement around the world. For the first time, people could see the famous ship up close. After reading about these visits, I wanted to know, what is the coolest thing explorers have found? They found some dazzling things. Glittering jewels, a bronze angel from the grand staircase, but most of the objects are pretty ordinary. Pots and pans, playing cards, shoes. The objects are a fascinating window into the normal, everyday lives of the people on board the doomed ship. So then I thought, Ballard must have brought some things home, right? Souvenirs of his amazing discovery? Actually, he didn't. A big debate about this has been unfolding ever since the Titanic was discovered. Ballard and many other scientists believed that the pieces of the wreck should stay at the bottom of the ocean, out of respect to the people who died. But others felt that they should be brought up so that people could study and learn from them. More than 5,500 objects have been removed from the shipwreck. Many have been shown in exhibits around the world. That made me wonder, what are some of the things experts have learned by studying these objects? They've learned a lot about the Titanic's passengers, what they ate during the voyage, what they wore, how they passed the time on the ship. And they've also come to better understand the disaster. For example, by examining pieces of the wreckage, scientists were able to figure out that the iceberg tore several smaller holes in the Titanic's side, rather than one long gash. Then I thought, forget about a museum exhibit. What if I want to go down and see the shipwreck for myself? I learned that I could, but it would cost me a lot. There are ocean exploration companies offering to take tourists down to see the wreck for about $100,000 a person.
Maybe I won't do that.
But visitors will get to do more than just see the ruins. They'll be collecting important information to help scientists learn more about the wreck. I wondered what I would see if I actually went down there. What does the Titanic look like today? Turns out that it's not in great shape. The wreckage has been slowly crumbling and collapsing over the past 100 years. Some of the damage has been caused by humans. Submersibles and camera equipment have bumped into the ship, causing pieces to break off. But a lot of the process has been natural. Powerful ocean currents have worn holes into the ship's deck and sides. Tiny sea creatures and bacteria have nibbled away at the wood and metal. Experts say that the ocean could fully swallow up what's left of the Titanic within the next 20 years. Researchers are working on creating 3D images of the ship so it can be studied long after it disappears. I hope going on this little research journey with me has inspired you to set off on one of your own.
So one of the things they learned when it sank is they didn't have enough what on board?
Boats?
They didn't have enough lifeboats on board for all of the people. Okay, so that's something that changed after this disaster, is they made sure they had enough lifeboats, and they didn't have enough life jackets for everyone either, okay? And when they were evacuating the ship into the lifeboats, they put women and children in first. So most of the people that survived, because people did survive it, right? Most of the people that survived it were women and children. But they didn't have enough lifeboats for everybody. So, all right, your article that you have in front of you, you're going to listen to that. Okay. All right, so we are reading the article out loud. We're gonna listen to it and you're gonna read, okay, with your eyeballs.
Hi, Scope readers. I'm Lauren Tarshis, and I am really happy to be here with you to read you my latest narrative nonfiction story, Searching for the Titanic. This was a fascinating article to research, a challenging article to write, and I'm really hoping that you're going to enjoy it. So let's go. Here's one thing I want you to think about as you read. What obstacles did Robert Ballard face in his search for the Titanic? Okay. On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic sped across the Atlantic Ocean. The sky glittered with stars over a sea as still as glass. On board were more than 2,200 people, bejeweled millionaires and hopeful immigrants, passengers from all over the world. This was Titanic's first voyage, but the luxury passenger liner was already world famous. Built from the strongest steel according to the most modern designs, the Titanic was said to be unsinkable. Then disaster struck. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic collided with an iceberg. As icy seawater flooded the ship, it quickly became clear that the Titanic was doomed, and so were most of those on board. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the magnificent ship disappeared into the inky black waters of the North Atlantic.
And cold.
Would it ever be seen again? Titanic sinks, 1,500 people lost. News of the Titanic's demise shocked the world. Immediately, people demanded that the ship be found. Some families held out hope that their loved ones could still be alive. But in truth, no one who went down with the ship could have survived. What's more, there was simply no way to reach the wreck. The Titanic had come to rest on the ocean floor, more than 10,000 feet beneath the surface. At that depth, the water pressure, the force that water puts on its surroundings, is incredibly powerful. Water pressure becomes increasingly crushing the deeper you go. The submarines that existed in 1912 could not venture that far down. Had one tried, it would have been crushed like a soda can. The Titanic was lost in a world as mysterious and unreachable as outer space. In the following decades, new inventions slowly opened the deep sea to exploration. The most important was a technology called sonar, which uses sound waves to create images of objects underwater. Then in 1960, two researchers in a submersible, a tiny submarine-like vehicle called the Trieste, reached the deepest known part of the ocean on Earth, a region in the Pacific Ocean known as Challenger Deep.
Okay, so that's a really far down and hard to reach area in the ocean, because the ocean, bottom floor of the ocean isn't flat like people imagine. There are essentially mountains and valleys, and it's especially this particular spot where the Titanic ended up. Continuing.
They descended 7 miles down into the murky blackness. They didn't see much, but their submersible withstood the water pressure, and the men made it back to the surface alive.
Okay, I thought 1 mile, but what did they say?
7.
7 miles underwater? That's nuts. You can't scuba dive and get all the way down to the bottom. You would die, your body would end up crushed, your ears would end up imploding. So they need special equipment that has that they're pressurized to help you withstand the depths, because the water creates pressure when you go that deep.
Their achievement inspired a generation of undersea explorers. One of them was Robert Ballard. As Ballard was growing up in Southern California, his friends loved to surf, but Ballard was more interested in what was happening underneath the waves. He went to college to become an oceanographer, a scientist who studies the sea. By the late 1970s, Ballard had spent more time in deep-sea submersibles than almost any other human. What wonders he saw: eyeless fish, worms the size of humans, foot-long clams, plants that thrive without a speck of sunlight, and mysterious plumes of boiling hot fluid shooting up from vents in the seafloor.
Okay, so it's not, it's not lifeless down there. There's a lot of different fish down there, and there's still fish and other organisms that they've never seen before.
But there was another undersea wonder that Ballard longed to find: the Titanic. Decades had passed since its sinking, yet millions of people like Ballard remained entranced by the ship. Like an invisible hand reaching up from the bottom of the sea, the Titanic held tight to hearts and imaginations. What about the Titanic was so fascinating? There was the ship itself, of course. At the time it was built, the Titanic was the biggest moving object ever constructed, and few ships were as luxurious. But more than the Titanic's powerful engines or opulent first-class cabins, it was the heartbreaking tragedy of the sinking that captivated people like Ballard. More than 1,500 people perished when the Titanic went down, and most of those deaths could have been prevented. The Titanic's crew had been warned that icebergs lurked in the ship's path. Yet the captain kept the ship steaming across the ocean at close to top speed. Even after the collision, it might have been possible to save all the passengers, but the ship carried only enough lifeboats for half of those on board. In the years following the disaster, survivors shared their terrifying memories, the haunting cries they heard as the ship sank, their hours of frozen terror in the lifeboats, their tears of relief when, at dawn, the ship Carpathia arrived to rescue them.
The Carpathia, by the way, did not respond to the calls for help right away, so they could have actually saved a lot more people. Some of the people that ended up in the water ended up just freezing to death because it was really, really cold.
Reading these poignant stories, Ballard became more determined to find the wreck. But where exactly was the Titanic? Nobody was sure. The Titanic's crew had relayed the ship's location after striking the iceberg, about 400 miles south of Newfoundland, Canada. But the ship had surely drifted during the more than 2 hours it took to sink. Ballard scoured historical records until finally settling on a 100 square mile area to search. In 1977, he and a team set out for the North Atlantic. Hopes were high, but then just days into the voyage, a 50-ton piece of Ballard's ship came loose and crashed down. $600,000 worth of sonar and other borrowed equipment plunged into the sea. Devastated, Ballard returned home. Ballard's failure made it hard for him to get support for another search, and soon he had a rival, a millionaire named Jack Grimm. Grimm loved spending money on attention-grabbing quests. Over the years, he'd searched, without success, for Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
You guys should be turning the page if you're following along. What page are we on?
Right.
Yep, page
In 1980, Grimm set his sights on the Titanic. He hired top scientists and purchased the best equipment. Ballard felt certain Grimm's team would prevail. He tried to let go of his Titanic dreams. Fortunately, he had other dreams to pursue. For years, Ballard had longed to create a better way to explore the deep sea. Submersibles enabled scientists like Ballard to glimpse the undersea world, but those journeys were perilous. Plus, submersibles could remain underwater for only a few hours at a time. Ballard had an idea for a new kind of remote-controlled submersible, one he called Argo. It was essentially an underwater robot covered with cameras, like an octopus with cameras and lights clutched in every tentacle. Argo would capture footage over large underwater areas that scientists on the surface could view on TV screens. With money provided by the US Navy, Ballard and a team got to work on Argo. Meanwhile, Grimm's Titanic search went on and on, without success. Finally, after 3 missions, costing millions of dollars, Grimm ended his Titanic quest. By 1984, Ballard had decided to try again to find the Titanic. This time would be different though, because this time he had Argo. The new submersible worked just as Ballard had imagined it would. In one of the first tests, Ballard used Argo on a secret US Navy mission to explore 2 sunken submersibles. Both subs had vanished in the Atlantic in the 1960s. Using Argo, Ballard quickly located the missing subs and gleaned a key lesson in the process. The submarines had broken up as they sank, and debris was scattered across more than a mile of the seafloor. Argo and Ballard spotted the debris and followed the trail to the wrecks. Surely the Titanic had also broken apart as it sank, Ballard realized. Furniture and dishes and other objects would have spilled out and been carried by ocean currents. Like a trail of breadcrumbs, the Titanic's debris would lead to the main parts of the wreck. Or so Ballard hoped. On August 24, 1985, Ballard and his team were back in the North Atlantic. They directed Argo to the area where Titanic had most likely sank. Argo's images flashed onto TV screens. Just as Ballard had envisioned, Argo provided a window into the deep sea. In the coming days, Argo would reveal deep undersea canyons, giant boulders, and enormous holes in the ocean floor. But mostly, the team saw nothing. The days ticked by, with no sign of the Titanic, not even a glint of metal. Ballard started to panic.
Hang on for a second. I'm trying to find it on here and I don't know why it's like completely lost. What page are we on? Are you on 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why 10 is like nowhere to be found.
Did you hit the arrow? Not that one.
Okay, so I'll go back,
The bottom?
the other arrow.
No, right.
It doesn't do anything when I hit it. Where's page 1? There's 8. 10 is completely not there.
Oh, see where it says page 8 up at the top right corner?
Yeah, so I'll do it here.
Try that.
Yeah.
What?
So maybe it's on the other side of it? There it is.
Oh, okay.
Got it. Thank you.
The US Navy was paying for this mission and had provided the ship and equipment. It had given Ballard a strict deadline, after which he and his team would have to head home. Was Ballard's quest to find the Titanic going to end in failure yet again? On September 1st, Ballard went to his cabin to catch a few precious hours of rest. He was exhausted and deeply discouraged. But then he was called back to the deck. He hurried to the control room and found his team studying an image on one of the screens. It appeared to be an enormous metal object covered in rust. His heart pounding, Ballard realized what he was looking at. One of the Titanic's boilers, a part of the ship's engines. Soon other images appeared. A piece of twisted metal, portholes, a banister. Cheers erupted. They had done it. In the coming days, Ballard and his team made more incredible discoveries. They found that the ship had cracked in half just before it sank. The front part of the ship was a third of a mile away from the back. They found jewels and dishes and shoes scattered across the sea floor. Ballard became world famous. But in those first exhilarating moments of discovery, a chill ran through his heart. Ballard thought of the people who'd been on board, his mind filled with their voices, their cries. He hadn't found just an empty shipwreck. He found the final resting place of a magnificent ship of dreams and of the hundreds who lost their lives on that starlit night in 1912. So what happened next? There's so much more that I wanted to tell you in this story. Luckily, there's a video where we can show you a lot of the amazing treasures that Ballard found. So make sure you check that out. It's called Beyond the Story, and your teacher can show you where to find it.
I did it the wrong
I
way
can't
around.
wait to join you next time for one of our read-alouds, and I hope that my story has given you a lot to think about. Hi, Scope readers. I'm Lauren Tarshish, and I am really happy to be here with you to read you my latest narrative nonfiction story, Searching for the...
There we go. All right, so they do give you some other things that are kind of interesting in here in the pictures and some of the captions, right? So here is an image of what they speculated it looked like sinking, right? So they said that it cracked in half. Right, they discovered that. They weren't sure, and they did all kinds of, they made models of a Titanic ship to try to figure out how it would sink, and they're still working on discovering all of that, so. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, and then they gave you, down here, there is like a timeline. And it talks about like the first submarines, because they used those before they started making these submersibles, right? So here we have the first submarine. The invention is credited to a Dutch engineer named Cornelius Drebbel. The vessel can go down a whopping 15 feet, which is not very deep. In 1888 is the first military submarine, right? And the French Navy launches the first fully functioning military submarine called the Gymnote. The steel battery-powered vessel can reach a depth of about 240 feet, which is pretty good. I've done a lot of scuba diving in my life. I've never gone that deep, so that's pretty good.
You never went down deep there, Tom?
No, not that deep, because it's quite dangerous. You can get certified to be a scuba diver, but there's different kinds of certification you can get. You can get deep sea certification. You can also get certified to explore shipwrecks. And people do that in the Great Lakes. There's lots of ships that have sunk in the Great Lakes, and people do shipwreck diving for those. And it's dangerous, because you go in underwater, right, and you go into some of these shipwrecks like the Titanic, and it can be really dangerous. You can get stuck. There can be critters in there. I've come across a few sharks while scuba diving. I've come across a stingray that was probably that big, and it was buried underneath the sand. I didn't even know it was under there. The sand just started moving, and it slowly came up from under the sand and floated away, and I was freaking out. But you can't really yell and run when you're underwater, right? And here's what happens to you underwater. You have an oxygen tank, and you kind of sound like Darth Vader under the water, right? And you're breathing, and bubbles are going up. If you're nervous when you're scuba diving and exploring something, underwater, if you're nervous, you breathe faster, your oxygen gets depleted faster. Okay, so that's one of the things they try to teach you when you learn how to scuba dive is like to calm down. It's hard when you come across a shark, like I did. Just swam closer to the other scuba divers that I was with, but. All right, so let's see. In the coming decades, research on military submarines will contribute to the development of new technology. So the military was very important. Raise your hand if you would like to learn how to scuba dive. That's what I asked for my 19th birthday. I asked my parents to pay for that for me. So in 1934, an alien world, two scientists, William Beebe
and Otis Barton reached a depth of 3,000 feet off the coast of Bermuda. The scientists travel inside a small metal sphere attached to a ship. They witnessed an alien world of bioluminescent creatures, that's glow in the dark, that had never been seen before, like this deep sea jellyfish. It makes its own light, so they actually glow in the water, underwater. Yeah.
Keep down.
Right? All right, so let's see, I can do this. Go to the next page. All right, and then we have some more items. So in 1942, they invent the aqua lung. Underwater explorers Jacques Cousteau, he was French, so he talked like this. My name is Jacques Cousteau. And Emile Gagnon invent the first modern scuba system in 1942. It enables them to stay underwater longer than ever before. In the 1950s, Cousteau develops sophisticated underwater videography tools. This is the first time they can take video underwater, and produces documentaries about the ocean. When I was like 4 years old, I used to watch Jacques Cousteau videos. They were awesome. These films allowed many people at home to experience the wonders of the world's oceans for the first time. So actually, before I became a teacher, I was interested in becoming an oceanographer. In Panama, where I'm from, they have the Smithsonian Institute. Smithsonian. I might be spelling out. Smithsonian. Okay, they have the Smithsonian Research Institute. It's one of the best groups that do oceanography. So if you want to become an oceanographer, moving to Panama, they do that there. Yeah. And if you want to live in warm weather, move to Panama and become an oceanographer. All right, kiddos, we're going to continue with this tomorrow. What questions or comments do you have about the Titanic? Raise your hand if you have a comment. Okay, questions or comments? Hang on. London?
Okay, so if you're gonna borrow, you're gonna have to put it back.
The oxygen tank that you take? Yes. So when you're diving in the ocean, the water is salty. Because, no, it doesn't taste very good. Listen, because the water is salty, you float more in salty water. I don't know if you guys know that. Yeah. So, when I used to go scuba diving, I had a tank, I had all kinds of equipment. I actually had to add like 10 pounds of weights to my scuba diving equipment so I could sink, because otherwise I could not sink. I'm like floating at the top of the ocean, like I can't get under. So I had to add weights so that I could sink a little bit. Yes, it's heavy, but because the water is salty, it doesn't feel heavy when you're in the water. Out of the water, yes.
Good afternoon, Warriors. It's almost time to go home. A few announcements for the Suns Flag football registration starts actually yesterday. So make sure that you get forms that are in the main hallway or the main office in the Suns website or the Suns Facebook page if you're interested in flag football. Also, a quick TBIS announcement. 7th graders, be sure to turn in all of your missing work and stay on your best behavior to participate in the positive rewards planned for the last week of school. We got some great activities going on.
What about 8th
grade?
grade?
Qualify if you're missing work or if you have referrals. Now we have 2 different ones going, so even if you do have a referral, it's not too late. Still get your work in so that you can at least participate in something. That's all that I have for the announcements. There are no bus changes, although I'm going to assume that 159 is 223. Have a great day, Warriors.
All right, what other questions or comments do you have about the scuba diving or about the Titanic? Thank you for raising your hand. Could you live, you'd be dead. That's 7 miles under the water, no, you can't. Any other questions? I feel like we should watch a portion of the movie Titanic.
Yes.
What's the song? Oh my my gosh, they don't know the song. I'm the king of the world.
The part where they sing.
Oh my gosh, they're too young to know the song.
I know the song.
You do? Alright. The movie Titanic that came out about 20 years, is it 20 years? 15 years ago? Was the best-selling movie, of best grossing film of all time. So, it's been a while.
My heart will go on. There it is.
Miss Leon, do you like
I'll play it for them.
It's about, so basically, yeah, it's about ice, like, very but you're gonna have to like
Putting up the chairs, please. Can you help with this side?
But so like how you get on the ocean world is you're on the new one, you're going down.
Hang on for just a second. Miss Julia,